Hi, I'm Dr. Scott Roseman. I'm a licensed psychologist here in Florida, and I have a family practice where I see children, teens, and adults for a variety of different issues. But today, I get to discuss one of my favorite parts of what I do, conducting gifted testing and the role that it plays in placing children in gifted classes in Palm Beach and Broward County schools. I've been in practice for over 30 years, and during that time, I have evaluated thousands of preschool-age children. If you are a parent of a child who will be graduating from pre-K and going to kindergarten this coming August, you're in the right place, because this talk is all about that transition. As I said before, I have evaluated thousands of pre-K-age children, and that means that I've talked with thousands of parents of preschoolers. I'm sure that you have carefully selected the early childhood program that your child has attended for several years now, or perhaps you've chosen to homeschool your child, and you're likely anxious about making the right choice for your child as they move on to kindergarten. And if you're not feeling somewhat anxious about this right now, don't worry, you'll get there when other parents start telling you about what they're doing, and then you start to question yourself about your decisions for your child's kindergarten place. I've been there myself. My wife and I have raised two children who've attended gifted classes, and now I have the distinct pleasure of watching them figuring out how to raise our 6 grandchildren, some of whom are now attending gifted classes as well. Sit back and listen. Don't worry about taking notes. I'll provide a link at the end of this podcast to a PDF that covers frequently asked questions about gifted testing, as well as links to my website that has more information and ways to contact me directly to ask any specific questions you may have about your child. You know the expression, every child is gifted in their own way? I'm sure there's truth to that, but the school system has their own way of determining who qualifies for a gifted placement. We'll discuss that in just a bit. I bet you've also heard the expression, oh yeah, everyone in Boca or Parkland or fill in the blank is gifted. Or another one of my favorites, just find a psychologist and pay them, and your child can be gifted too. Let's address those comments from the get-go. In theory, gifted intellectual ability is generally considered to be the top 2% of the population. Clearly, there are more than 2% of children in gifted classes in this area. Actually, the number is closer to 6 or 7%. In my opinion, that is more a function of the young age that children in this area are evaluated for placement in a gifted program. In Palm Beach County schools, gifted placement begins in kindergarten, and in Broward County in 1st or 2nd grade. So, if you want your child to be placed in a gifted program on day 1 of kindergarten, they would have to be tested while they're still in preschool. That means that many of these children will be tested as young as 4.5 to 5.5 years old. Many of these kids have attended high-quality preschools since the age of 2, come from bright, well-educated households, and test very well at this age. Will these scores hold up over time? In some cases, yet, but in my experience, test scores at this young age can tend to be inflated by as much as 5 points than they might be if the child were to be retested at age 8 or above. This would mean that there would be a significant number of children whose test score at age 4 or 5 were between 130 and 134, and they would not have qualified for a gifted placement had they been given the IQ test at age 8. In both Palm Beach and Broward County, once you are qualified for a gifted placement, it is only conditional on continued teacher recommendation, and no further testing is ever required. Do I believe that this is the best system? Quite frankly, no. But they did not consult me about this, so I follow the guidelines as they are set out. Regarding the comment, just pay a psychologist and your child can be gifted too, all I can say is that if that is what you're looking for, please don't come to me. As I mentioned earlier, this aspect of my practice is very near and dear to me, and I would not ever consider risking my reputation or my career to recommend placement of a child in a gifted program who does not belong there based on established standards for placement. It is neither in the best interest of the child or the program as a whole. Now let's move on to looking at the qualities of a gifted child. Those of you who have more than one child can appreciate the differences in each of your children on so many levels, whether it be in their temperament and sensitivities, interest levels, levels of curiosity, speed at which they grasp a concept, physical abilities, artistic abilities, and so on. For the purposes of this discussion, we're going to talk about the concept of an intellectually gifted child. Qualities often associated with intellectual giftedness include curiosity, ability to understand and appreciate abstract concepts, such as why things work the way they do, rather than just accepting things at face value. The intellectually gifted child tends to ask a lot of questions about almost everything and grasps concepts quickly, or might amaze us by figuring out things by themselves. They may also be highly sensitive to their own feelings and the feelings of others. While these represent some gifted qualities, there are many other qualities that are frequently demonstrated by gifted youngsters and can vary greatly from child to child. The next question is how these qualities are assessed by the school system to identify who qualifies for a gifted placement in school. In both Palm Beach and Broward County, there are two measures that are taken in combination to determine whether a child will be considered for a gifted placement. First, individual IQ testing by a qualified psychologist or a school psychologist. An overall score of 130 or above must be achieved on the IQ test. As a point of reference, 100 would be considered average, 115 high average, 120 superior, and 130 very superior or gifted. A score of 130 is at the top 2% of all children tested. The second component of the assessment is the completion of a gifted rating checklist by the child's current teacher, indicating that the child displays a sufficient level of gifted qualities, such as good critical thinking skills and intellectual curiosity. In certain instances, where children from underrepresented backgrounds or where English is not the primary language spoken at home, a special matrix may be utilized, giving different weight to the various gifted criteria. Let's talk about the actual testing process. When IQ testing is conducted, it is done on an individual basis with the parent not present in the room. Parents are justifiably concerned about how their child will perform with a new person they have never met before. If you decide to have your child evaluated by the school psychologist at your child's school, one significant upside is that the school system offers this service at no cost to you. The downside is that it will take them anywhere from 6 to 8 months to get around to doing the testing. So the kindergarten year will be almost done before they get to do the testing. Plus, you'll have no idea in advance as to when the testing will be done. You'll only find out about it after the fact. I handle the experience quite differently. I start by spending time with both the parent and child in my office together before we begin the assessment, in order to ease into the process. I have a camera in my waiting room, and I will tell the child that we will be able to spy on their parents while we meet. And you'll be surprised at just how many children will then quickly usher their parents out of the room, just so that they can spy on them. I perfected this initial process over the years, and I'm quite skilled at addressing the unique personality styles of 4 to 6-year-old children, from the painfully shy who won't utter a word and hide behind their mom or dad, to the most active and forward child who walks into my office and touches everything in sight without hesitation. For those parents who are concerned about leaving their child alone with me, I also offer the option to watch the testing process without audio on an iPad that I provide. The schools specify that only certain standardized tests can be used to qualify a child for a gifted placement. There's a whole alphabet soup of possible tests, from the WPPSI to the RIAS to the DAS or the KABC and others. I'm familiar with all of these, and I will choose the one that seems best suited for your child's needs. For a 4 to 6-year-old child, the actual test time is around an hour. I will give you feedback that same day, and I typically have a report prepared between 1 or 2 days from the date of testing. While I'd love to have the opportunity to evaluate your child, there are many qualified professionals in this community who can provide this service. What you want to make sure of when you interview psychologists or school psychologists is that they are appropriately licensed or certified by the state of Florida to conduct this type of assessment. But an important question to ask when interviewing psychologists is how much experience do they have working with young children? There is a world of difference in working with young children when compared to older children or teens. While all of the professionals would be considered qualified by the state of Florida to do the testing, not all have the extensive experience working with 4 to 6-year-olds. I would suggest asking the preschool or public school for recommendations for psychologists they have experience working with. I feel honored that many schools in the area frequently include my name when they provide a list of professionals they trust. Let's talk about some other questions that frequently come up, like the availability of a remote testing option. Since the pandemic, several test publishers have released a digital version of their test that can be administered remotely. Remote testing results have been accepted by almost all schools in this area, as long as it is noted in the report that the test was administered remotely. In my experience, most children have responded well to remote administration of the test, which generally involves answering questions directly or responding to questions related to information presented on the computer monitor or iPad. This has become a great option for families that are relocating to Florida from another state but have not moved here yet. Many parents want to know when testing can be done and what is the ideal age to test a child. Frequently, I hear from parents that they've been told to test their child before they turn 5 because the test is easier. Let me assure you that this is not true. The scoring criterion for most IQ tests change at 3-month intervals, even though the test is the same. It has nothing to do with being 4 or 5 years old. If your child will be entering kindergarten this coming August, testing must be done anytime after January 1st up to the beginning of the school year. But I generally encourage you to get it done by April or early May so that the school has adequate time to review the results. I generally do not recommend testing a child for the gifted program younger than 4 years, 6 months of age, unless the child appears to be highly gifted. Testing can be done at any age through middle school if gifted placement is being considered for reasons such as change from private to public school, recent relocation to this area, or underachievement in school where superior intellect and boredom is suspected. Parents have asked me if a child can be retested if they have already been tested for the gifted program at school or privately. The answer to that question is yes, but before I would agree to conduct a reassessment, I would want to know the particulars about the previous testing, such as the test that was administered, the test profile, the reasons for requesting a reevaluation. In most instances, I would need to administer a different test than the one that the child had previously taken, unless that test was given more than 1 year before. It is critically important to disclose that your child was previously tested. I have parents attest to this before I will conduct a reevaluation for gifted placement. Another question I frequently get is, how can I prepare my child for the test? This is an easy one. Don't. In all seriousness, just make sure that your child gets a good night's sleep prior to testing and has a nutritious breakfast in the morning. I strongly urge you not to coach your child. These are not tests you can or should prepare for, as they are meant to measure innate ability. Do not overemphasize the importance of this test or act in a way so as to add to any test anxiety. Do not speak in terms of passing or failing the test, which is basically impossible, but rather in terms of doing one's best to help with the best placement for next year. For young children, I recommend talking to the child about meeting someone new and being able to show off everything you know so we can show your kindergarten teacher how smart you are. You may be wondering about the cost of testing. How clever to wait until the end of this to discuss money. Cost of gifted testing in South Florida typically ranges between $300 to $700, depending on the education, credentials, and experience of the evaluator. My fees for gifted testing are $250 for a screening and $500 for IQ testing and the accompanying report. I require a $50 deposit at the time of setting up an appointment, which is applied to the cost of testing and is fully refundable up until 24 hours before the appointment. Hopefully I've answered many of your questions here, but as promised, I've included several links to include a PDF of frequently asked questions about gifted testing, a link to my website where I have extensive information about gifted testing. Feel free to text me or call me with any specific questions you may have about your child, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Relax, this will all work out, and thanks for spending this time with me.